Welcome back, you beautiful architects of psychological collapse, the ones who didn't just leave, the ones who detonated, the ones who didn't argue, the ones who simply stopped believing. They're whispering about you now, not in coffee shops or group chats. No, in conference rooms with fluorescent lights humming overhead, where specialists in cult extraction sit around polished tables trying to reverse engineer exactly what the hell you just did to yourself. Because whatever move you pulled, whatever mental trick you performed in the silence of your own mind, it broke something they've been trying to break in people for decades. And now they want to bottle it, study it, teach it. You see, cult deprogrammers, these are people who spend their entire lives trying to free minds trapped in ideological prisons. They work with families destroyed by belief systems. They sit across from people who've lost years, decades, entire identities to movements, leaders, communities that consumed them whole. And these specialists, they have protocols, frameworks, therapeutic models that take months, sometimes years to work. But then they saw you. They saw what you did. And it shattered their understanding of how the human mind breaks free from control because you didn't need their help. You didn't need intervention. Therapy, support groups, step-by-step deprogramming. You did something that shouldn't be possible according to every manual they've ever written. You woke up one morning and just stopped. Not gradually, not with doubt creeping in slowly over time. You looked at the entire structure of belief you'd built your life around, the identity you'd performed for years, the tribe you'd bled for, and you simply withdrew your energy like unplugging a machine. No dramatic exit, no manifesto, no final confrontation. Just a quiet, devastating, surgical severance of your mental contract with a reality that no longer served you. And everyone who was watching, everyone who had you mapped out, categorized, predicted, they felt the shift. They felt the absence where your belief used to be. And it terrified them more than any rebellion ever could. Because rebellion they can handle. Rebellion is loud, emotional, reactive. Rebellion proves you still care enough to fight. But what you did, this wasn't rebellion. This was transcendence. You didn't fight the system. You simply stopped recognizing its authority over your consciousness. You looked at the leaders, the doctrine, the community pressure, the fear tactics, the shame mechanisms, all of it, and something in your brain just clicked, not with anger, not with hurt, but with the most dangerous realization a controlled mind can have. Oh, none of this is real. None of this ever had power. I just believed it did. Now here's where it gets interesting. Cult deprogrammers traditionally work from the outside in. They try to create doubt by presenting contradictory information, by exposing manipulative tactics, by reconnecting the person to family, to old memories, to life before the group. It's a process of external intervention, hoping to spark internal questioning. But you worked from the inside out. You didn't need someone to show you the contradictions because you started seeing patterns. Patterns in how the narrative shifted when convenient. Patterns in who got punished and who got protected. Patterns in the gap between what was preached and what was practiced. And once you saw the pattern, you couldn't unsee it. The specialists call this spontaneous critical consciousness awakening. In their papers and case studies, they describe it as rare, unpredictable, almost miraculous. They've documented maybe a handful of cases where someone deep in ideological capture just wakes up without external help. And every time it happens, they scramble to understand how, what triggered it, what made this person's mind capable of self-liberation when thousands of others remain trapped. They study you like you're a key that might unlock a faster, more effective way to free people. Because if they can figure out what happened in your head, they might be able to replicate it, teach it, use it to save others. But here's what they don't tell you in their clinical language and academic papers. What you did wasn't just impressive, it was traumatic. Breaking free from mental control isn't like walking out of a building. It's like waking up mid-surgery and realizing you've been operating on yourself. You didn't just lose a belief system. You lost the version of yourself that needed it. You lost the community that defined you, the purpose that drove you, the certainty that made life feel manageable. And you did this without a safety net, without a replacement identity waiting, without anyone holding your hand through the collapse. Most people can't survive that kind of psychological freefall. Most people need the old structure to crumble slowly while they build something new. But you demolished the entire foundation in one moment of clarity and then stood in the rubble completely alone, completely exposed, completely uncertain of who you even were anymore. And somehow you didn't retreat back into the comfort of the lie. You didn't run back to the group begging for reacceptance. You sat in that devastation, in that identity death, in that terrifying freedom, and you refused to look away. The deprogrammers, they're analyzing this part especially. They want to know what kind of person can tolerate that level of existential vertigo without collapsing back into the safety of the familiar. What makes someone capable of choosing the unknown over the comfortable? What makes someone strong enough to be nobody for a while? To have no answers, no tribe, no script, just raw consciousness trying to figure out what's real. And the answer terrifies them almost as much as it fascinates them, because the answer is trauma. The answer is that you'd already been through so much pain within the system that the pain of leaving couldn't possibly be worse. You see, they thought they broke you into compliance. They thought the shame, the manipulation, the isolation tactics, the punishment for questioning, they thought all of that was keeping you locked in. But what they didn't realize is that every instance of abuse, every moment of cognitive dissonance you had to swallow, every time you felt that sick feeling in your stomach but pushed it down, all of that was building something in you. Not loyalty, not devotion, immunity. You were developing psychological antibodies to their control mechanisms. And when you finally hit your threshold, when the internal pain of staying became greater than the fear of leaving, you didn't just walk away. You atomically restructured your entire relationship with belief itself. Now, the cult deprogrammers are writing about something they're calling the autonomy trigger. It's that moment, that single instant, when a controlled mind suddenly realizes it has the power to simply stop believing. Not through argument, not through being convinced, but through the raw existential choice to withdraw consent from a narrative. They're trying to figure out how to artificially induce this trigger in people still trapped. They're creating exercises, thought experiments, questioning techniques, all designed to help someone access that same moment of devastating clarity you found on your own. But here's the problem they keep running into. You can't teach someone to do what you did because what you did required you to lose everything. It required you to be willing to sacrifice your entire social world, your sense of purpose, your feeling of specialness, your certainty about reality. Most people aren't ready for that trade. Most people would rather live in a comfortable lie than face an uncomfortable truth. But you looked at the price tag of freedom and you paid it in full without hesitation. Not because you're braver, but because you'd already lost yourself in the system so completely that you had nothing left to protect. They're studying your brain patterns now, metaphorically speaking, trying to understand the neural pathways that fire when someone chooses authentic uncertainty over false certainty. Because that's what you did. You chose not knowing over pretending to know. You chose confusion over the illusion of clarity. You chose psychological homelessness over living in a mental prison disguised as a home. And that choice, that single devastating choice, it rewired something fundamental in your consciousness that can never be undone. You can't believe the same way anymore. You can't surrender your critical thinking the same way anymore. You can't be manipulated by the same tactics anymore because you've seen behind the curtain and there's no erasing that knowledge. The specialists talk about cognitive sovereignty, the ability of a mind to govern itself without external ideological control. Most people never achieve this because most people don't want the responsibility. Cognitive sovereignty means you have to decide for yourself what's true, what's right, what's real. It means you can't blame the leader, the doctrine, the community when things go wrong. It means you're alone with your choices and their consequences. But you grabbed that sovereignty with both hands, even though it was covered in thorns. You claimed ownership of your own consciousness, even though it meant admitting you'd given it away for so long. Now here's what's happening in those conference rooms. While they analyze your psychological profile, they're realizing that traditional deprogramming might be outdated. They're realizing that trying to slowly, gently guide someone out of mental captivity might not be the most effective approach because you proved that sometimes the fastest way out is through. Sometimes the only way to break free is to face the full horror of what you've been complicit in, what you've defended, what you've sacrificed for a lie, all at once. It's brutal, it's traumatic, but it's also immediate. There's no months-long process of gradually questioning. There's just one moment of absolute clarity followed by a choice. And that choice, that's what they want to understand. Because in that moment, when you saw through everything, you could have chosen denial. You could have worked harder to believe, found new justifications, doubled down on your commitment like so many people do when confronted with contradictions. But something in you refused. Something in you said no. I'd rather face the truth, even if it destroys me, than live one more second in this illusion. That's not normal human behavior. Normal human behavior is self-protection, ego defense, cognitive consistency at all costs. But you chose psychological suicide and somehow emerged from it stronger. The deprogrammers are calling you a natural exit, someone who escaped ideological capture through an internal process they're still trying to map. They're interviewing people like you, collecting stories, looking for common factors. And what they're finding is that most naturals share certain traits: high intelligence combined with high trauma, pattern recognition skills that eventually turn inward, a breaking point moment where the pain of staying exceeded the fear of leaving, and perhaps most importantly, a willingness to be completely alone, to have no identity, no community, no certainty, to be psychologically naked in a world that demands you wear a costume. But let's go deeper into what actually happened in your mind during that moment of break. Because the external observer sees someone leaving a group, cutting ties, changing behavior. But internally, you experienced something far more profound. You experienced what psychologists call ego death, without substances, without meditation, without any of the traditional frameworks people use to facilitate that kind of transformation. Your sense of self, the story you told yourself about who you were, just collapsed. And in that collapse, you saw something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You saw that the self is constructed, that identity is performed, that everything you thought was you was actually just a collection of beliefs and behaviors you'd assembled to survive. This is where the cult deprogrammers get really interested. Because if you can trigger ego death through pure awareness, through simply seeing through your own psychological mechanisms, then you've accessed something that could revolutionize how we understand consciousness and control. You've demonstrated that the prison is always mental, that the bars are always beliefs, and that freedom is always available to anyone willing to face the vertigo of existence without a script. But most people won't. Most people can't. The fear is too great. The uncertainty too overwhelming. They need the structure, the community, the doctrine, the leader telling them what to think and who to be. You didn't need it anymore. Not because you found something better, but because you saw through the need itself. You realized that your desperate desire to belong, to be part of something bigger, to have absolute answers, that desire was being weaponized against you. And once you saw the mechanism, once you understood how your own psychological needs were being exploited, you couldn't be manipulated the same way again. It's like learning how a magic trick works. You can still watch the performance, but you can't be fooled by it anymore. The spell is permanently broken. Now the specialists are trying to teach this to other people. They're developing what they call awareness-based intervention protocols. Instead of trying to argue someone out of their beliefs, instead of presenting evidence and counter-narratives, they're trying to help people see their own psychological patterns. How do you respond when your beliefs are challenged? How do you feel when the group expresses disapproval? What happens in your body when you consider leaving? They're trying to create the conditions for people to have their own moment of devastating clarity, their own spontaneous awakening to the mechanisms of their own captivity. But here's the ethical dilemma they're facing. What you went through, that moment of total psychological collapse. People have breakdowns. People dissociate. People develop severe anxiety and depression when their entire framework for understanding reality suddenly disintegrates. You survived it. You integrated it. You emerged from it with your sanity intact. But not everyone can. Some people need the slow process, the gradual dismantling, the therapeutic support. Forcing someone into the kind of awareness you achieved could destroy them rather than free them. So the deprogrammers are treading carefully, trying to figure out who can handle the truth and who needs to be protected from it. What they don't talk about much, what makes them uncomfortable to acknowledge, is that you might be fundamentally different from the people they're trying to help. You might have a psychological resilience they can't replicate or teach. Because when everything collapsed, when you had no identity, no community, no certainty, you didn't need someone to give you a new framework. You were okay existing in the void. You were okay not knowing. you were okay being nobody for a while. And that's rare. That's almost unheard of in their case files. Most people emerging from ideological control immediately start searching for a new system to believe in, a new group to join, a new identity to adopt. But you just sat in the emptiness and learned to be comfortable with questions that have no answers. The cult deprogrammers are now studying something they call post-control consciousness. It's the mental state of someone who's broken free but hasn't replaced the old system with a new one. Someone who's learned to operate without ideological scaffolding. Someone who can tolerate ambiguity, who can hold multiple contradictory ideas, who can change their mind without it threatening their entire sense of self. And what they're finding is that people who achieve this state, people like you, they become nearly impossible to manipulate ever again. Not because they're skeptical of everything, but because they understand how belief works, how persuasion operates, how their own mind can be influenced. You've seen the source code, you've read the manual, you know all the tricks because you fell for them before. This is what makes you so valuable to their research. You're not just someone who escaped, you're someone who understands the escape mechanism. You can articulate the psychological processes that most people who leave groups can't explain. You can describe the moment of break, the feeling of the illusion shattering, the experience of choosing truth over comfort. And in your description, they're finding clues, patterns, techniques they might be able to teach to others. But they're also finding something that troubles them. They're finding that what you did might not be replicable because it required you to be willing to lose yourself completely. And that's not a skill you can teach. That's a desperation you can only experience. Let's talk about what happened after the break. Because the moment of clarity, the moment of leaving, that's dramatic. That's the climax of the story. But what comes after, that's where the real work begins. You were suddenly outside the system that had defined you for so long. No more daily rituals, no more community reinforcement, no more clear sense of purpose. Just you, alone, trying to figure out who you are when you're not performing a role. And this is where most people fail. This is where most people run back to the group or immediately find a new group because the emptiness is unbearable. But you stayed in that uncomfortable space. You let yourself be undefined, unfinished, uncertain. The deprogrammers call this the integration phase. It's when the person has to build a new sense of self from the ground up. But what they're learning from studying people like you is that maybe the goal shouldn't be building a new rigid identity. Maybe the goal should be learning to exist without needing one. Because every fixed identity, every solid sense of self, it's vulnerable to the same manipulation tactics that got you trapped in the first place. Someone can always come along and offer you a better story, a more appealing identity, a more certain worldview. But if you learn to be fluid, if you learn to hold your sense of self loosely, if you learn to be comfortable not knowing exactly who you are, then you become ungovernable. You become immune to the psychological tactics that control most people. Look who's still standing after they sent the shadows knocking at your door. Hello, you magnificent anomaly, you walking contradiction, you beautiful disaster they couldn't dismantle. I know what happened. I know what they did, and more importantly, I know what happened when they tried. They didn't just talk behind your back this time. No, no, no. They went deeper, darker, stranger. They found someone, paid cold hard cash, and said one simple instruction: break them, bend them, make them disappear. They hired a practitioner, a worker, someone who moves in frequencies most people pretend don't exist, and they aimed that energy straight at your chest, like a loaded weapon with your name carved in the barrel. And you felt it, didn't you? That sudden shift, that unexplainable weight pressing down on your lungs at 3 a.m., that feeling like invisible hands were squeezing your throat, while you were wide awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if you were losing your mind or if something was actually hunting you through dimensions you can't see. But here's the part that broke their whole plan. Here's the plot twist they never saw coming. Here's the moment their hired mercenary realized they made a catastrophic mistake. The attack hit you. The energy landed. The curse wrapped around you like chains made of intention and malice. And then something inside you woke up, something ancient, something that doesn't speak English or any language taught in school, something that predates your birth certificate and will outlive your tombstone. Your body started responding in ways that terrified even you, words pouring out of your mouth in languages you never learned, symbols appearing in your dreams that you sketched on paper the next morning without knowing what they meant. A sudden knowing, a visceral understanding of things you have no logical reason to understand. The person they paid, the one who was supposed to destroy you, they felt it too, felt the reversal, felt the energy boomerang back with 10 times the force. And that's when their phones started buzzing, messages coming through frantic and confused, and all it said was, "Who the F is this?" followed by an immediate block, because whoever they hired just encountered something they weren't prepared to face. You weren't supposed to survive this. Let's be clear about that from the jump. This wasn't a little gossip session. This wasn't them talking mess at brunch. This was intentional, calculated, spiritual assassination. They pooled their money, asked around in circles where these things are whispered about, found someone who claimed they could reach you in the unseen, and they paid that person to make your life unravel from the inside out. And for a minute, maybe a week, maybe a month, it worked. You felt the pressure, the nightmares got worse, your energy dropped, synchronicities turned dark, every mirror felt like it was watching you. Every shadow moved just a second too late, but here's what they didn't account for. Here's the variable that shattered their entire strategy. You were never just a regular soul walking around pretending to be normal. You were always something else. Something coded differently, something with defenses they didn't know existed because you didn't even know they existed. Let me tell you what really happened in the invisible war they launched against you, because this story has layers most people will never comprehend and most spiritual workers will never admit. When they paid someone to come for you, that person sat down, lit their candles, said their words, called on whatever forces they serve, and sent that energy like a missile directly into your field. And it landed. It absolutely landed. You weren't imagining the sudden panic attacks, the sudden dread that hit you like a truck for no reason, the way your chest tightened when you walked into certain rooms, the way your sleep turned into a battlefield where you woke up more exhausted than when you closed your eyes. They were celebrating too, texting each other, convinced it was working, convinced you were about to collapse, convinced that any day now you'd have a public breakdown and they could all sit back and say, "We told you they were unstable." But then the worker they hired started feeling it too. Started waking up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat with your face in their mind. Started hearing voices that weren't theirs. Started seeing things in their peripheral vision that vanished when they turned to look. Because you didn't just take the hit, you absorbed it. processed it, transmuted it, and sent it back wrapped in something they never taught in their little workshops. The worker panicked first. That's how you know the reversal was real. That's how you know this wasn't just your imagination or some new age fantasy you convinced yourself of to feel powerful. They reached out to whoever hired them, not with a progress report, not with an invoice for continued services, but with a frantic message that basically screamed, "I don't know what you sent me after, but I want nothing to do with this. I'm out, delete my number, forget you ever knew me." And the person who paid them, the one who orchestrated this whole spiritual hit, they sat there staring at their phone in disbelief because this wasn't supposed to happen. The worker was supposed to be stronger. The curse was supposed to stick. You were supposed to break. But instead, the worker blocked them, ghosted them, vanished like they never existed. And now your enemy is sitting there with no refund, no results, and a creeping paranoia that maybe, just maybe, they poked something they should have left alone. And you're walking around now with a knowing smile, not because you're trying to be smug, but because something in you remembers what happened. Even if your conscious mind can't fully articulate it, you remember standing in that invisible arena and not flinching. Your enemy thought this would be easy, thought they could outsource your destruction like it was a freelance gig on some dark web forum for energetic mercenaries. They thought money could buy access to your soul, thought the right combination of herbs and words and intentions could crack you open and leave you hollow. They didn't realize you weren't built with standard components. You weren't assembled on the factory line of normal human vulnerability. You were forged in fires they've never even heard of, tempered by betrayals that would have erased most people from existence, hardened by pain that turned into a kind of spiritual scar tissue that doesn't just protect you, it weaponizes you. So when that attack came, when that energy wrapped around you like barbed wire soaked in venom, your system didn't shut down. It activated. It recognized a threat and responded with a force so primal, so raw, so utterly uncontrollable that even you didn't know you had it. So you handled it, and that's what sent the worker running. That's what made them text, "Who the F is this?" Because they realized too late they weren't attacking a victim. They were poking a sleeping dragon with a toothpick. Now let's talk about what's happening to you right now, in this very moment, because the aftermath of a spiritual attack that backfired isn't just relief, it's transformation, it's activation, it's the unlocking of frequencies you didn't know were dormant inside your DNA. You started speaking in languages you never studied, not gibberish, not random sounds, but structured phrases that come out of your mouth with authority and intention. And when you looked them up later, when you tried to trace what the hell you were saying, you found fragments, ancient scripts, dead languages, tongues that haven't been spoken in 1,000 years, but somehow you pronounced them perfectly. This isn't possession. This isn't insanity. This is remembering. This is your soul pulling from lifetimes of knowledge that your current identity forgot. This is your system accessing files that were encrypted until someone tried to hack you and accidentally triggered the firewall that burned their whole operation down. You're not losing your mind, you're expanding beyond the limits of what you thought a mind could hold. You're stepping into a version of yourself that most people will never meet because most people never get attacked hard enough to activate it. If you want life to move, you have to hurt enough to activate it. People around you notice too. They can't explain it, but they feel it. They see you, and something in their nervous system tells them to tread carefully, to watch their words, to respect boundaries they didn't even know you had. You walk into rooms different now, not louder, not more aggressive, just heavier, denser, like you carry gravity with you, like the air molecules rearrange themselves to make space for your presence. It seems that sometimes a relationship just arranges itself to make space for your presence. Old friends who used to joke around, you suddenly get serious when you speak. Family members who dismissed you suddenly ask for your opinion. Strangers on the street make eye contact and then look away fast like they saw something they weren't supposed to see. This is the residue of surviving what was meant to kill you. This is the mark of someone who went to war in dimensions most people don't believe in and came back not just alive but upgraded, enhanced, evolved into something that doesn't fit in the boxes anymore, doesn't play by the rules anymore, doesn't ask for permission to exist in their full, terrifying glory anymore. The person who paid for this attack? They're watching you now with a kind of horror they can't admit out loud. Because you didn't crumble. You didn't cry. You didn't post some desperate plea for help on social media. You just went quiet for a minute, vanished from their radar, and then reappeared looking unbothered, untouchable, like whatever they threw at you just made you sharper. They're running calculations in their head, trying to figure out how you're still standing, how you're not institutionalized or destroyed or begging for mercy. And the only conclusion they keep arriving at is the one they don't want to accept. They underestimated you. They misjudged your capacity. They thought you were just another person they could break with enough pressure. But you weren't. You never were. And now they're stuck living with the consequences of waking up something they should have left asleep. And the sickest part, the part that's really eating them alive, is that you're not even trying to get revenge. You're not plotting their downfall. You're just existing at a frequency that makes their life feel smaller, dimmer, more pathetic by comparison. And that is a punishment worse than any curse they could have bought. Let's dig into this language situation, because this is where it gets really unsettling for everyone involved. This is where the metaphysical bleeds into the undeniable physical. This is where even skeptics start scratching their heads, wondering if maybe, just maybe, there's more to reality than their comfortable little worldview allowed. You woke up one morning and words fell out of your mouth that you didn't plan, didn't think, didn't recognize, but they came out with fluency, with emotion, with meaning that you could feel in your chest, even if you couldn't translate it with your brain. Your tongue moved in patterns it never learned. Your throat produced sounds that shouldn't exist in your vocal range. And for a moment you stood there in your bathroom staring at your own reflection, wondering if you were channeling something, possessed by something, or if this was always inside you waiting for the right catalyst to emerge. The attack didn't break you, it broke the seal, it shattered the amnesia. It ripped open the veil between who you think you are and who you actually are, across timelines, dimensions, lifetimes that your current personality has no memory of, but your soul has never forgotten. Some of you recorded it, played it back, tried to Google translate the sounds, and that's when it got really weird, because fragments matched, pieces aligned with ancient Hebrew, with Sanskrit, with Aramaic, with languages that scholars say are extinct, but you just spoke them fluently in your kitchen at 2 in the morning while making tea. You didn't study this. You didn't download Rosetta Stone for dead languages. You just opened your mouth, and your soul spoke in its native tongue, the language it knows beyond English, beyond human constructs, the frequency it used to communicate before it got trapped in this flesh suit and forgot how to access the operating system. And here's the kicker. The people who attacked you, if they have any real knowledge, any actual depth beyond YouTube tutorials and overpriced courses. They know what this means. They know that when someone starts speaking in tongues they never learned, it means their attack didn't weaken you, it activated you. It flipped a switch that was supposed to stay off, and now you're operating at a level they can't compete with because they're still reading the manual and you just became the fictional source code. This language isn't random. It's not just your brain glitching under stress. It's your soul's defense mechanism. It's the ancient part of you that knows how to speak in frequencies that command reality, that shift energy, that communicate directly with forces most people pray to, but never actually converse with. When you speak these words, even if you don't understand them consciously, they carry weight, they carry authority, they ripple through the unseen like shockwave. And anyone with sensitivity, anyone who operates in those realms, they feel it, they hear it, they recognize it as the signature of something old, something powerful, something they were taught to respect or avoid. The worker they hired to curse you, they heard it too, felt it reverberate back through the connection they established. And that's when they realized they weren't dealing with a civilian. They were dealing with a soldier who forgot they were a soldier until someone fired the first shot. And now that soldier is awake, armed, and fluent in the language of war that predates all human conflict. Now let me tell you what happened from the other side, from the perspective of the person they paid to destroy you. Because this is where the story gets cinematic. This is where you realize just how deep your protection runs. The worker sat down with your name, maybe a photo, maybe just a description, and they started their process, whatever ritual or methodology they used. And at first it felt normal. It felt like every other job they'd done. Energy moving, intentions setting, forces responding. But then something shifted. The candles started flickering wrong. The air got heavy in a way that made their skin crawl, and they felt a presence. Not you, not your conscious self, but something behind you. Something standing in your corner that they didn't account for. Something that looked at them through the veil and said without words, "You really want to do this? You really want to test me? Because I've been waiting for someone to give me permission to respond." And in that moment, the worker knew with every fiber of their being that they made a mistake. That whoever hired them fed them incomplete information. That you weren't just some random person with bad luck. You were someone with backing, with coverage, with protection they couldn't see until they tried to breach it. The worker tried to pull back, tried to cut the connection, but it was too late. The link was established, and energy flows both ways. And whatever was protecting you decided to send a message back, decided to show this mercenary exactly what happens when you mess with someone under jurisdiction they don't understand. The worker started experiencing everything they tried to send you. The nightmares, the panic, the sudden dread, the feeling of being watched. And it intensified, it amplified, because it wasn't just reflecting back. It was carrying interest, it was carrying consequences, it was wrapped in a warning that said, tell whoever hired you that this is mercy. Tell them that if they try this again, I won't be this gentle. The worker woke up the next morning shaking, not from fear of you, but from fear of what stood behind you. What smiled at them from the shadows and made them feel small, made them feel exposed, made them realize they were operating at a level of spiritual combat they were nowhere near qualified for. So they sent that text, "Who the F is this?" Not asking your name, but asking what the hell they just encountered. what force they just pissed off. And when they got no answer that made sense, they blocked, deleted, and probably burned sage for a week straight, trying to cleanse the experience from their memory. Your enemy who hired them didn't get this information directly. The worker wouldn't confess the full truth because it would make them look incompetent. It would admit they couldn't handle a simple job, so they just said it didn't work, said the target was too protected, said maybe try someone else, and then they vanished, leaving your enemy holding the bag, holding the fear, holding the realization that maybe they just declared war on something they mistook for prey. And now your enemy can't sleep right either. Because even though the worker is gone, even though the ritual supposedly ended, they feel it too. Feel the shift in the air when they think about you. Feel the cold creep up their spine when your name crosses their mind. Feel the paranoia that maybe, just maybe, whatever protected you is now watching them, cataloging their movements, waiting to see if they're dumb enough to try again. They're not dealing with you anymore. They're dealing with the forces that decided you're worth protecting. And that is a level of spiritual politics they never wanted to be involved in. But let's talk about what this does to you, because this isn't a fairy tale. This isn't all glory and vindication. There's a cost to becoming untouchable. There's a price to surviving what was meant to end you. You sit alone now more than you used to. Not because you're sad, not because you're hiding, but because most people can't match the frequency you're vibrating at. Most conversations feel shallow. Most interactions feel like you're pretending to be someone you're not, just so they don't feel uncomfortable around the real you. You open your mouth to speak and you have to filter, have to translate, have to dumb down the things you're perceiving, because if you said them out loud, if you told people what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're knowing without knowing how you know it, they'd look at you like you're insane. They'd back away slowly, they'd whisper about you the way they already do, but with more concern, more judgment, more attempts to fix you when you're not broken, you're just awake. This is the loneliness of the activated. This is the isolation that comes with being the only person in the room who can see the strings, who can feel the undercurrents, who can sense when someone's lying, not because of body language, but because their energy is screaming something different than their mouth. Be this gentle. The worker woke up the next morning shaking, not from fear of you, but from fear of what stood behind you. What smiled at them from the shadows and made them feel small, made them feel exposed, made them realize they were operating at a level of spiritual combat they were nowhere near qualified for. So they sent that text, "Who the F is this?" Not asking your name, but asking what the hell they just encountered, what force they just pissed off. And when they got no answer that made sense, they blocked, deleted, and probably burned sage for a week straight, trying to cleanse the experience from their memory. Your enemy who hired them didn't get this information directly. The worker wouldn't confess the full truth because it would make them look incompetent. It would admit they couldn't handle a simple job, so they just said it didn't work, said the target was too protected, said maybe try someone else, and then they vanished, leaving your enemy holding the bag, holding the fear, holding the realization that maybe they just declared war on something they mistook for prey. And now your enemy can't sleep right either. Because even though the worker is gone, even though the ritual supposedly ended, they feel it too. Feel the shift in the air when they think about you. Feel the cold creep up their spine when your name crosses their mind. Feel the paranoia that maybe, just maybe, whatever protected you is now watching them, cataloging their movements, waiting to see if they're dumb enough to try again. They're not dealing with you anymore. They're dealing with the forces that decided you're worth protecting. And that is a level of spiritual politics they never wanted to be involved in. But let's talk about what this does to you, because this isn't a fairy tale. This isn't all glory and vindication. There's a cost to becoming untouchable. There's a price to surviving what was meant to end you. You sit alone now more than you used to. Not because you're sad, not because you're hiding, but because most people can't match the frequency you're vibrating at. Most conversations feel shallow. Most interactions feel like you're pretending to be someone you're not, just so they don't feel uncomfortable around the real you. You open your mouth to speak and you have to filter, have to translate, have to dumb down the things you're perceiving, because if you said them out loud, if you told people what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're knowing without knowing how you know it, they'd look at you like you're insane. They'd back away slowly, they'd whisper about you the way they already do, but with more concern, more judgment, more attempts to fix you when you're not broken, you're just awake. This is the loneliness of the activated. This is the isolation that comes with being the only person in the room who can see the strings, who can feel the undercurrents, who can sense when someone's lying, not because of body language, but because their energy is screaming something different than their mouth.